Hey YouTube, welcome back. I've got a build here for you. I have someone in Twitch chat who's been begging me to try this build for months, and I thought it was the biggest meme every time that he explained it to me. It turns out this build is actually cracked. It is so good, it levels so easily, and it's hilarious. So we're going to talk about this build. It is way better than it has any right to be. I want to introduce this build to you. We're going to call it Totem Pop. We are building around one specific node in Thorn Totem. We're going to play a Shaman. Technically, you might be able to do this as a Druid or Beastmaster. No, we're a Shaman build because we want the minus mana cost of a Totem. So we're going to build around a node called Rotten Core. This node says, when a Thorn Totem dies or are unsummoned, they release a Poison Burst, which deals a small amount of physical spell damage and inflicts poison on hit. So what does this build do? We're going to take that small amount of physical spell damage and we're going to make it skyrocket. We're going to crank this up to 11. We're going to make it 100% chance to crit. We're going to scale crit multi. And this is a Thorn Totem minion build that scales off of your cast speed. So it's kind of a weird build. It's awesome. It had me laughing the whole way because I had no idea that this build was going to be any good. And I played it in softcore because I thought it was going to be garbage. So here's the build. We're going to build around Thorn Totem, and we are a Spriggan build. I guess we're going to walk around in Spriggan form. We have our healing totem here. Our healing totem becomes a Thorn Totem, and all we're going to do is hold down right click. So the visuals are a mess, but it's also hilarious. So we're going to get over that real quick. We have an AoE shotgunning nuke. So all three of these can hit the enemy. It is screen wide on your mouse, so we can off-screen enemies very easily. If there is an enemy inside of a proximity bubble, this is a minion build, and the minions are inside the proximity bubble, so we bypass proximity bubbles very well. Another standout thing about this build is you can play it from level 32 or 33 or so, as soon as you have Spriggan form and Thorn Totem, and when you're low level, you don't have much crit, you don't have much adaptive damage for your totems, but this applies a poison on hit, and then the thorns themselves, every time they, I guess this doesn't count as a minion, but every time that they unsummon, they release one thorn. So every time that you're doing this explosion on an enemy, you have like the pops of poison as well, and each one will hit the enemy with one thorn. So while you're leveling from like level 30 until level 71, you're basically a poison build. And then once you become level 71, you're going to put on your Pharaoh's Chisel. This gives you all of your base crit. You're going to put on your Death Rattle as well, which gives you a bunch of critical strike multiplier to go with the minion base crit from Pharaoh's. And all of a sudden you become a minion crit build instead. And that's where all of your adaptive damage for minions is going to start popping off. Pun intended. So we level as a minion poison build, we become a minion crit build, and then we just have a ton of damage. We have our two skills that matter here, Spriggan form and Thorn Totem. In Spriggan form, we're only ever using one button. Technically, if we get in trouble, we can use Thorn Shield because Thorn Shield procs our Terra's Blessing and it keeps us nice and healthy. But our other skills, Summon Spriggan, you would think that Summon Spriggan is really important for us because it gives us 8 base crit, it gives us crit avoidance, it gives us adaptive spell damage, and yeah, these things are relevant, but if there were another skill we wanted to use instead, we could even drop Summon Spriggan. Ice Thorns does virtually nothing for us, but there's no better option, so we might as well use it. Terra's Blessing, yeah, it's fine, it heals us, it gives us some extra resistance, but even then, every time that we hold down right click, so this scales on cast speed, every time that we have that pop, we have 10 life from in the Druid skill tree, gained as health on spellcast, and then we also gain 30 life times 3 from Death Rattle. Regain 30 health on minion death. So really, if you want to play this as a one-button build where you're not even using Thorn Shield on yourself, you might get into a situation where you need to use a potion or something. But our skills don't really matter that much. It's really just this node. The other thing to talk about with this character, I have 2 clips at the very beginning of this, in case you want to rewind to take a look at them. I did a boss 2 times, once with Nightshade Briar turned on, and once without Nightshade Briar turned on. Why does that matter? Because Nightshade Briar is basically infinite damage, it has no cap, and it gives hit damage per poison. on the enemy, and like poisons can stack for a long time. And then we have poison duration on this node as well, just because we have to travel through this in order to get to Rotten Core. So this node gives us a ton of damage, but it's only on the thorn hits themselves. And the majority of our damage comes from the totems exploding. And every time that they explode, they release one thorn. So even though we're a minion build and we're scaling cast speed, like our own cast speed to summon them as often as possible, there will be some thorns popping out, one from every totem as it explodes, and it will be applying some poisons, and the pop applies 3 poisons because each one has poison chance on it. And we also have like some vines that we could summon on a boss if we really needed to, or as we're walking around, Eterra's Path just happens to apply some poisons, and it happens to proc some vines, and then those vines have poison chance on them based on your attunement and like some base poison chance as well. If we were not using Eterra's Path, if we were not using Garden of Rage, then we might need 2 points or maybe even 3 points in this. If we weren't a shaman with the minus 5 totem mana cost, we might also need additional points into Memories of Eterra. But as it is, because we're a shaman, because we have Garden of Rage, because we're using Eterra's Boots, we only need 1 point here, which is great. Early on in your gearing process, because you're going to be using Pherobors, which gives you a base crit equal to your intelligence. So we have 43 and then 5 base, which is 48. When we have 48 base critical strike chance, we can cap our totem's crit chance with literally just this one node. And I don't even need 4 points in this. I'm just have 3 points in here because it also has a little more damage multiplier on it. So as your crit gets better and better, you can flex some points over to the right side, which gives you some adaptive, and it's not adaptive damage, but it gives you some base damage, which is pretty good as well. 1 point in this is about equal to 4% more damage as soon as you have 100 adaptive on your spell. All right, so we could look at Spriggan form. The only points that matter here are these points on the bottom right. We have 4 for Totem Warden, 1 to turn it into a Thorn Totem, and the 1, the most important, makes it summon 3 at a time. The other points here, we have a whole bunch of armor, we have some Garden of Rage for Rage Sustain, but the most important are these things here. Nothing else really matters. We talked about Thorn Totem already. As we are in Spriggan form, we can always cast our Thorn Shield on ourselves. And every time that we cast it on ourselves, we also queue up a Eterra's Blessing. So we heal immediately, and then we also have this healing over 4 seconds, and then it heals us again heals again for half of the initial value at the end of the duration. So this healing hard carries you throughout all the campaign, and then even end game, there's not much else that you want to be taking instead, so we're still going to be using Eterra's Blessing. In the Mastery, once again, we're going to go through this pretty quickly, because very little of it actually matters. In our base Mastery, we have some health. Let's stand away from this thing so the Maelstrom doesn't proc. We have some health, some minion spell damage. We could dual wield. We'll talk about that in the gearing section. But we have 1 adaptive spell damage per point. Why would you dual wield? Well, we're going to be using a Pherobors as our dagger in our main hand. If you wanted to use a weapon in your offhand, you could use either a Tempest Maw, which has some totem synergy on it, or Pact Severance, which is interesting because it has 25 cast speed on it. So if you want to go ham and deal giga damage with no regard to, your defenses, use Pact Severance, because the rest of the text on the bottom, like when a minion dies, that stuff, your minions aren't dying, they're being unsummoned. So the only reason that Pact Severance would be good is that it gives you cast speed, because this is a build that scales on your cast speed, and that it also happens to have synergy with this node right here. So in Beastmaster, we have some incredibly boring points. This is called the Beastmaster tax, because it's defense, 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 and they're all really good, so you might as well take them. In Shaman, we're being a Shaman because we are the -5 totem mana cost here, but we have 1 node here, which is most important for us. If this node didn't exist in Shaman, Shaman would go from like a 1% fringe playable mastery to a 0% fringe playable mastery. This is the only node that matters to us. So it gives us 16 adaptive damage, which is a huge amount of minion adaptive. It's pretty much the only reason that we're a Shaman, aside from the -5 here. We've got some extra points along the way. Cast speed, armor, percent increased totem damage. These things are all helpful. but this is really why we're here. Taking a look at the Druid nodes as well. Druid, we have, I guess we only need 5 points in here, but I think it's kind of nice anyways because it's health. But it gives us, what is it? The rage cost as health. So we have 10 health from this on spellcast, and then along with Death Rattle, which is 30 times 3 is 90. Every time we right click, we're getting 100 health back. So it's a tiny bit of sustain, which is kind of cute. We have some strength and attunement. We have 1 point here because there's nothing better to take. And we have 5 points in as much attack and cast speed as possible. It gives us some movement speed. That's cute. I overcapped my endurance. If you don't have overcapped endurance, you would put 5 points into chitinous plating here to get your endurance up to 60%. Yeah, I have a ton of armor and I have a ton of endurance, which is the only reason I don't have this spec. You would probably have this spec. That does it for the mastery there. We talked about the skills. Let's talk about pretty much the only interesting part of this build. So we're using both of these set items because they're perfect for us. We have 43 intelligence, and some of that intelligence is coming from our offhand weapon. If we wanted to be as glass cannon and have as much damage as possible, I think we would use Pact Severance because it has a bunch of attack and cast speed. That cast speed is how we're summoning our totems. Get some LP on this, and then it has synergy with the node here, this Elder Branch node, offhanding an axe. This would be like the most glass cannon option. Your tankiest option, which again is the best option because it's boring, is putting on a Bastion of Honor. This would be incredibly tanky. So let's talk about the halfway point right in between. So if you don't want to be glass cannon and you don't want to fall asleep, what could you do instead? Well, so you can use a cast speed implicit on your catalyst, or you can use a minion damage implicit on your catalyst. Both the cast speed and the minion damage are very relevant for you. Getting exalted cast speed is the only prefix that matters. You can get some minion damage as well, but really it's the cast speed that is the most important line of text on this. We talked about Death Rattle already. This is Minion Critical Strike Multiplier. You don't care about the intelligence. You're going to have plenty of intelligence. You're going to cap your crit no matter what. Don't worry about the intelligence roll here. The minions take % increased damage. You'd like to have that as low as possible so that your Spriggan pet stays alive. But again, realistically, it doesn't really matter. Let's talk about the prefixes on your helmet and your body armor. The reason that we're not trying to use like a unique item or something and like just put some LP on it is the prefixes for our helmet and our body armor are extremely important for us. They give us huge amounts of damage. So we have Totem Adapted Damage, which goes with 22. It's pretty good. And then as many levels on Thorn Totem as possible. Thorn Totem has like the more multiplier here. We have the nodes up here that we're willing to grab. We have up to 4 points over here. And then if we have as many points as possible, like if we have, 23, 24, 25 points, we're going to dump all those points over here into Winterwood, which is just flat cold damage. So we have plenty of uses for additional levels on Thorn Totem. On our chest piece, pretty much the same thing. Minion Crit Multi, Totem Adaptive Spell Damage is exactly what we're looking for. And then your suffixes should just be as much life as you can get. Same thing for the belt. The prefix, the minion health regen, it's technically helpful because it helps keep your Spriggan pet alive. Minion damage is all you're looking for. It's a pretty basic looking belt. Percent health, hybrid health, and cleanse as your prefix. You can also cleanse just by using Thorn Shield on yourself because your Thorn Shield procs Eterra's Blessing, and Eterra's Blessing cleanses you all the time. So technically, you don't even need the cleanse, but I do it by habit. The boots give us some extra rage generation. These vines, as we're walking around, apply some poisons, and some poisons are good for us because Thorn Totem benefits from some poisons with the extremely insane Nightshade Briar node. But I think the last spicy item for us to talk about is Jeweler's Obsession. So these gloves, they always have at least 1 LP on them, and whatever stat you LP onto the gloves will also be on the minions. So this gives our minions 8 adaptive spell damage by default. It gives our minions Void Res, 80 armor, Cold Res, Lightning Res. That's cool. But our build is a hit-based, physical, predominantly physical, crit minion build. And I don't ever hit. I hit extremely seldomly with my build. So how can we put Armor Shred onto our build? Once we stack Armor Shred up, which we can because we hit so often, like twice as often as it looks like here because we also have Thorn shooting out, we can stack up Armor Shred extremely well on this character. Last piece of gear that's relevant here is our relic. We're just looking for exalted cast speed. Cast speed's really the only thing that matters here. the suffixes, health, endurance, whatever you're looking for at that point. For the relics, I feel like this whole build is like nothing matters. Like stack cast speed, put on these unique items, the build's absolutely busted. But what you could use here is minion crit avoidance. You could use something like this, would be excellent if it rolled well. Percent increased health for yourself, and then shared percent increased minion spell damage. Up to 32, you use a couple of these, it scales your own defenses and the damage of your minions. This kind of thing seems perfect for the build. Otherwise, you could do chance to gain haste while you summon a Thorn Totem. We already have some haste coming in from... Oh, sorry, you could have some haste coming in from Ancestral Speed if you wanted to spec some points into that. But just having a little bit of chance to gain haste here means that as you're running around, you're going to have enough haste. You'll be running around maybe 74. Maybe if you get some LP, Terra's Path, you can get maybe like 90% movement speed on this character, and you'll feel quite good at that point. Blessings. All right, what do we say? It doesn't really matter. You're right. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so we have tons of resistance because we're a shaman. We could do things like health. What's the TLDR? This build's hilarious. It was supposed to be a meme. It is way better than it has any right to be. And when you talk about this build, when you mention this build to somebody, they're going to assume that you're building around the Nightshade Briar node. But as we demonstrated at the very beginning of this video in the gameplay footage, even if this node does not exist, this build is still better than it has any right to be. So we're going to keep playing Last Epoch up until the point where multiplayer launches, because there's still plenty of weird meme builds that we haven't discovered or played or investigated sufficiently yet. And I want to, because every once in a while you find a build like this and it pays off huge. So if you have questions, you can always leave those in the comment section of this video here. You drop by Twitch live at twitch.tv/PayThePig, where I stream almost every day playing some Last Epoch. So thanks for being here. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time.